Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Every Day is Friday 365. I'm your host, Matthew, and remember to subscribe so you can join me on this journey where every day is Friday. Today, I got a really special guest joining us, Sawyer. He's a mindset coach, he's a dad, and someone who helps fathers show up better for their families. Let's dive right in. Sawyer, thank you for being here, man. How you doing?
Matthew, it's really good to see you again, man. It's been a wild ride since the last time I was on with you. It's been about 8 months or so, I think now. And, a lot has happened in my personal life. And every time something new comes up, it just reinforces how powerful the techniques are that I've learned to train my mind, because you either have the ability to increase your capacity, or you have to decrease your workload in order to, make improvements in your life. And sometimes it's just not possible to decrease that workload. So you have to be able to increase your capacity. And that's exactly what I've been doing. So it's been a lot lately, but I'm working through it and I'm getting better every day. So yeah, it's been awesome.
Now,
What's
Sawyer, where have you been finding meaning and purpose in today in your life?
Well, that's a really great question. Where I've been finding meaning and purpose lately is, first of all, I got married a few months ago, so that was a big thing, and my wife and I are expecting our first now. So those are two major things that have just come into my life recently. And then third one is my father. He got injured, and I became his full time caregiver a few months ago as well. So that's been really where I've been focused on, and personally. And then, of course, always looking for ways to reach out and help, to find people who are in need of the tools that I have and teaching them how to live their lives to the fullest. And that's really where I'm at right now. It's been great.
So you're one of the podcast guests I've had that I realized you had a strong mindset. And I realized that when you were telling me the story on the last podcast about you were at the Highland Games and you got bit by a dog, uh,
Yeah.
like like right before the event. And it was
Hours before.
a
Yeah.
strong mindset. Could you dive into that for the listeners and people watching at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So, that was the first game that I had of the season, and it was literally like we talked about last time. 8 hours before I was supposed to compete, I got attacked by this huge Anatolian Shepherd, and I'd had I got a leg injury. The back of my calf got a really nasty bite, and I still wasn't able to walk when I got onto the field the next morning. But using the techniques that I've used and creating a positive mindset, doing specific work inside of my body, I was able to not only compete, but win every single event in my division to sweep the division for that day. So it's something that, you want to talk about like practical tools. The mindset training is so critical to being able to get the results that you want every single day. And really, what that comes down to is utilizing your energy and focus towards what you want. So for the broader audience, to stay high chunk so everybody can kind of follow along here. What that really means is, at a biological level, you are transmitting energy constantly. That's a basic tenet of physics, is your energy can't be destroyed, right? It moves from one place to another, and it can be stored and then released. Just like, you think about practically, in a really practical sense, if you take a green branch, and you bend it, you're storing energy inside of that branch. If you let it go, it snaps back into place, right? Because all that energy that you've put into it from your body, you physically transfer that energy into the branch. And then when you release it, the energy itself is released and the branch goes back into its place. So if you think about that in a broader sense of what you put your energy into every day, not just in the physical, like, what you physically interact with, but where your focus goes, that is where you can find a lot of areas where maybe the energy is leaking or being directed towards things that really don't serve you. What one of the things that we work on and train in this field and teach people how to do is to notice what they're focusing on is usually the things that they don't want, right? So people get stuck in negative emotions or negative situations with relationships or money or just their situation in life. It's because their focus is on what they don't want. They see something show up in their life and they interpret it in a negative way. Say you get in a car wreck and insurance doesn't cover it for some reason. You've got a negative situation and you have the ability to either handle that with a focus on how to solve the situation, or you stay stuck with the situation because your focus is on how much of that energy is going into, oh, this is terrible. This has happened to me. What am I going to do? This is just so bad. And so the mind creates a new track or a new strategy of thinking that is focused on the problem. And so at a high chunk level, wherever your attention goes, your energy flows. So we talk about, you know, focusing on what you want to have.
Now, would your mindset focus towards what's negative and not risky?
Yeah, from a default perspective, that's what everyone's tends to do. I mean, statistically, you have roughly 60,000 thoughts a day, and the science says that 70+% of them are negative. So default settings, humans tend to focus on the problem, not towards a solution, but usually looking for reasons why. And why is a big one. That's a really good way that people can gauge how they're conceptualizing the problem in their minds. If the words coming out of their mouth are, why did this happen to me? Then the results that they're going to get are just at the most reasons. Does that make sense? Because the why question doesn't lead to a solution to the problem. It just gives you a reason why it exists.
So, what's a belief that people can have to help heal?
That is a great question, Myth. So, a belief that people can have to help heal and to change their mindset and to change their focus is one that really can be applied to every area of your life. And that is, no matter what is happening in front of me right now, I can be grateful for this thing. I may not know how I'm grateful yet, but if you look back over the course of your life, over all of the memories that you have about things that have happened, you may remember them in a negative way. But if you look at how they changed your life, you can almost always see how just that thing happening was a catalyst for your growth in some way. Does that make sense to you? If
Yeah,
you,
like for
you,
you, for like you would like during the Alaskan Games,
Mhm.
was there a moment your mindset like mattered more than your strength?
Absolutely, 100%. That's what happened, especially that day that I got injured. A lot of people would have said, "Okay, well, there's no point," because when I went out onto the field the next day, I literally couldn't walk. I was hobbling because my body was still healing itself, and what I had to do inside was focus on my goals, and so I created a scenario mentally where I was able to compete no matter what my body felt like. And that belief that I held so strongly, that focus that I had was not on the problem. It was not on how much, my leg was hurting and how much it sucked and how terrible that was for my chances. It was actually on the outcome that I wanted to see. And the result of that was obviously that I was able to compete and win because my focus was on the outcome that I wanted rather than on the outcome that I didn't. So, at a broader perspective, this is something that everybody in their life can utilize, if they remember this, the mind doesn't really process things the way that we think it does. So I'll give you an example. If I were to ask you, Matthew, to not think of an apple tree, you would first have to create the image of the apple tree in your mind and then attempt to kind of erase it mentally. Does that make sense? Right? When I said do not think of an apple tree, what did you think?
I did exactly what you said. I thought of an apple tree, then I tried to think about something else.
Exactly. Because the way that specifically English has been constructed and has evolved over time, we didn't used to speak that way. In days of yore, we would have language structured so that the subject was at the end of the sentence. So now we start with the don't, with the negative, and then we follow it with what we want the person to avoid thinking about. And the mind isn't designed to function that way. So it hears the don't, and then it hears the last thing, which is think about an apple tree, and it follows the last suggestion made. Does that make sense? So for everyone in their lives, when you're giving someone an instruction, especially yourself, rather than focusing on the negative aspect, the don't do this, what you have to start doing mentally is saying what you want instead. So if I wanted you, instead of think of an apple tree, I would say, Matthew, I want you to think of a dinosaur. Now, if you're thinking of a dinosaur, then you're not thinking of the apple tree. Does that make sense? So if you need to give an instruction to yourself, say, if you need to remind yourself, hey, don't think about this right now, focus on this instead. Always follow it with what you want your mind to
Let
do.
me give you this example I heard on the internet. So they're saying to people that are smoking
Mm-hmm.
cigarettes or weed or any type of vape pen they're smoking out there is to, if they want to give it up, to say that I am not a smoker.
So there is again, a component there that basically if you leave it at that, if you say I'm not a smoker, then you've got that problem with your mind attempting to create the identity, because I am a smoker or I am not a smoker, those are both identities, and identities are what drive our behaviors. And so if you are wanting to quit smoking, I would suggest, rather than saying, you know I'm not a smoker, I would say I'm a non-smoker. Does that make sense? Because you're changing the way that it's held conceptually with the mind. And if you're not a smoker, then what are you? Right? So if you don't want to be a smoker, who do you want to be instead? And that's the question that I would ask anytime an identity like that comes up. So if you don't want to be a smoker, I would say, I'm not a smoker. I am a healthy individual who makes positive choices that are best for my body at all times. Now, that's a powerful identity, because that allows you to make those choices and to create behaviors that reflect that. If that's your identity, if that's the way you hold yourself, then you're going to make decisions that align with that identity.
Let me ask you this. Why do people why do people resist change even when they want to change?
Mm, that's a really great question. And the way that I would answer that is the way that people struggle with making those changes when they say that they want to is really comes down to identities that they hold and values that they hold. So, a value is really something that is deeply important to you. And you may not really be conscious of it, but everyone has a hierarchy of values stored inside of them, things that they really hold dear. And if we're not conscious of them, then they will drive our behaviors, without us knowing about it. And so you've got, two parts of yourself there. You have the conscious thinking part that's saying what you want, and then you have the unconscious part, which is creating the behaviors for you. And anytime you're doing something without consciously going through the thought process of, oh, I'm going to move my hand from here to here. If my hand is just moving while I'm talking, it's because that unconscious part of the mind is controlling it, because it creates the behaviors for us. So at a higher level, you've got the identities that you've accepted about yourself over time. And then you've got the values, things that are important to you. And both of those, if they are in conflict with what you say you want to do, you're going to lose out every time because your conscious mind is only capable of controlling your movements, your ideas, your thoughts, and your actions when you're focused on it. Does that make sense? Because when you go to sleep, your conscious mind is the part of you that sleeps, right? There's still brain activity there. Your mind, your body doesn't shut down completely, right? Part of you is still keeping you running. And that part of you gives you all of your dreams, wakes you up if there is something, that happens, if you hear a sound or whatever. But the conscious part, the part that makes the decision, oh, it's time to go to bed now, that part is gone. That part's out the window. There, that's the part of you that sleeps. So that's the part that has the limited focus. And so what you can do is I take you through a really quick little process. It's really easy. This is something that can help someone to sort of figure out, where are they in conflict with themselves? Where's the conscious mind in conflict with the more unconscious part? So you can ask yourself several questions that will get you to kind of look at this in a better way. So if you want to improve your performance, say, you can write down all the beliefs that you have about yourself. Okay, so you just get a piece of paper out, write down the beliefs that you have about yourself. Say, I believe that I am, and whether it's positive or negative is irrelevant because what we're looking for is just to get what you currently have. Right? You have to start where you're at. You cannot start from where you're not. So you write down the beliefs as they come to you. You ask yourself, okay, what do I believe about myself? And then you just sit there and wait. And as those beliefs come up, you write them down. Then you're going to create a column next to them, or two columns rather. And in one column, you're going to write yeses. In one column, you're going to write nos. And so you're going to write down next to each, you're at the top, you're going to write, is this serving me? And then across from each statement of belief about yourself that comes up, you're going to write a yes or a no. So if you see a belief that is serving you, you say yes. If it's not, you say no. And at that point, you'll have a much better understanding of what you have truly believed about yourself that really you didn't realize before. And then you can start to do the conscious work of saying, okay, if this belief isn't serving me, what do I need to do to change it? And that's where you can really start diving into the meat and potatoes, of making those changes happen rather than
Because
just
we create our realities.
exactly. We create the reality either through, whether we're aware of it or not, we're constantly creating the reality that we have. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with simply because they don't understand how, mechanically that happens.
Well, nothing will change if nothing changes.
You're absolutely right. And so in order to create that change, you need to become aware of where the conflict is inside of you and where that block is operating, where those beliefs are conflicting. What you have and what you don't have are worlds apart. And you can bring them together through processes like this that'll allow you to look at exactly what you believe about yourself. And then you can become conscious and make an assessment about whether you need to change those beliefs.
I wonder what the percentage is of people out there that have strong mindsets and then people that don't.
Well, I think you can look at, for the most part, I would say a pretty solid correlation can be found in the people who are not just successful, in their business, but marriage, personal life. If you look at the, spread across the board of all those different sectors, because a person can be successful in one area, but because of those, conflicts of belief, they may have trouble in others. classic one is, someone who is really successful in their business and they're climbing the corporate ladder and they're making all kinds of success and they're receiving the accolades and, the respect of their peers. And at the same time, their home life is a shambles. Their spouse feels disconnected and distanced from them. Their children don't get to see them enough and don't feel the, love and nurturing care that they need. And so success and, a positive mindset, the mindset that gets you where you want to go is only useful if it's useful across all areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting. Very is interesting. You've been diving into helping fathers show up better for their families. Can we dive into that a little bit?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially, in times like this, there's a lot of negativity being broadcast out there, and politically especially we live in a climate right now that's very chaotic, and there's lots of voices shouting and screaming all sorts of things that can create a lot of fear in people. And one of the things that I've been looking at lately is how important it is for, especially for fathers, to learn how to manage their internal state. Essentially, how to be unruffled by the emotions and the messages that other people are shouting. Does that make sense? Because if you allow yourself to be affected by those things, if you live in a state of shock and surprise, then you are at the effect of other people. And so, at the core, in order to best raise your children, to teach them how to manage their own states, you have to start with yourself. And that starts with making conscious decisions. You can do a lot of things, really simple steps that will help you to get to the point where you're no longer affected by everything around you, because we live in chaotic times, and it doesn't matter what end of the political spectrum you're on right now. There are voices all over screaming and shouting, terror, horrible things are happening. And here's the thing, whether that's true or not is irrelevant, because when you allow yourself to be affected by it, essentially you're stuck in a state where there's nothing that you can do, right? If you don't have the ability to affect change at a national level, then what is how is the emotion of fear serving you? And so if you can recognize that the actual, situation that's going on may be terrible, from your perspective, it may be absolutely the worst thing you've ever imagined. At the same time, sitting in a place of fear about the future does not allow you to perform well in any other area of your life. Because, it's been said before, fear is the mind killer. It really, really is. It's the base emotion for all of the other emotions, anger, hurt, sadness. All of those really stem from a place of fear, where you're, afraid of not getting what you need, not being able to have what you want right now, not being able to get enough of it. Those are really, really deeply rooted fears for basically everyone. And so if you allow yourself to live at the effect of the fear that other people are putting out, which from a biochemical perspective has been demonstrated, really, really interesting studies have been done on how the state of fear can be transferred from one person to another very, very quickly. And just with things like, chemicals, pheromones and things like that, that we produce when we're in that state. Other people can pick up on them if you're in the same physical space. And they've done experiments where they'll have a room full of people that are in a static state. Everybody's kind of like us, they're just so. They're median, everybody's pretty calm. And then they get someone who is in a very, very excited fear state, and they have that person go into the room. And within 2 minutes, 30, 40 people in this room all are exhibiting elevated signs of fear. Increased heart rate, increased blood pressure. Pheromones are being given off by everyone that indicate fear state because that state is transferable to other people. So if you're not aware of that, then you're constantly left at the effect of the fear of others, and there's no recourse for you to resolve it because, like I said, at the end of the day, if you don't have the ability to affect a massive change yourself, then there's no way for your body to neurologically process and let go of those feelings unless you become aware of them and recognize that and decide, okay, this can be true and I can still manage my state. And once you
With
go,
all your experience, now how does a dad's emotional state affect the whole house?
now that is a great question, Matthew. The dad's emotional state really is crucial to the children and the mother. If they're in a state where dad comes home and he is frustrated from work, say, fairly common scenario, can happen to anybody. It's happened to me. If you come home from work and you are frustrated and you are focusing on the problem that you had at work, again, remember, we're going back to where your focus is, right? If your focus is on the problem you had at work and how this coworker mistreated you and you know didn't give you the time of day, was supposed to help you on a project, they basically blew it off and you had to do all the work yourself. If that's your mindset when you step through that door, you are taking that state and you are giving it to your family. Just like we just talked about, a room full of strangers, the state of fear can be passed from one person to another almost instantly. How much more so a family that is dependent on you, who is looking up to you, children who have what we call mirror neurons, a whole bunch of neurons in the brain that are specifically designed to mimic states of behavior. You walk in the door carrying that state with you, you immediately transfer it to everyone in that house. And then you get a whole bunch of bad attitudes, people who are feeling unresourceful because you brought that unresourcefulness in and gave it to them. And now you've got people crying and screaming and tantrums and it's chaos, right? So one of
What's
the
a good method to go around this if
yeah,
someone comes at you with a different, frequency?
that is a great question. That's just what I was about to say. One of the things that you can do is take a pause. This is so like silly simple, but it is so effective. If you can wait for 3 seconds, if you can stop the reaction, if you can delay for just 3 seconds, neurologically, the brain is able to shift into a new position. So, say somebody pulls out in front of you and your first reaction is to lay on the horn, throw up your hands and scream obscenities because, your fear response, your limbic system is activated and your body is trying to keep you alive. It saw a threat to you, and so it's reacting in a way that it perceives will protect you from the threat. If you can notice that in the moment, become aware of it as it's happening, and just do one breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, 3 seconds long, you can choose. It neurologically gives your mind space to choose a different response than the one that is based on the nervous system's protection mechanisms. And so you can do that anytime. I use it all the time. If I have something happen like that, somebody comes out of nowhere and surprises me because, like we talked about earlier, getting into a state of surprise can happen to us. I fall into effect just as easily as anyone else. The difference for me is I have the awareness now to notice, oh, this just happened. I'm at effect. I can make a choice to do something different or to respond differently. And just that pause gives enough of a gap in between the stimulus and the response of the body for your conscious mind to come back in and control the situation.
You have to be like water.
You really do. And the exciting thing about that is you are. You already are. And the water inside of you is malleable and adaptable, and it creates life inside of your body, right? Your ability to make changes in your environment is because your body is full of an intelligent body of water. And I mean, we could go into that on, there's a whole string of research that's been done specifically on water and how it affects how you can affect it. If your audience wants to look it up, Dr.
I
Masur.
really want to I want to dive into what your definition is for a father. So like I want to set the foundation. What is your definition for a father? What is a father? What's your definition of a strong father today?
So, my definition of a strong father today is one who is aware of his emotional states at all times and conscientiously transfers those which are best for his children to them, teaching them how to manage their own states. That is absolutely key, because if you can teach a child how to manage their states, they can use that skill to surpass any challenge, any problem. One of the things that I tell my children all the time is you can solve any problem. And I always have them repeat it, right? Okay. My little 5-year-old, his name is Thomas. Thomas, how many problems are you able to solve? I can solve any problem, Daddy. That's right. That's what I want you to believe. Because if you believe that, how much more likely are you to actually solve the problem? Your belief shapes your reality. And so if you teach a child that they are capable and you reinforce their ability to problem solve themselves, and the smaller they are, the more guidance they need because they're still developing those traits. And as they grow older, you reinforce them and you continuously hand them more of the problem. So if they come to you and say, Daddy, my sister is being mean to me and she kicked me, I could respond in one of two ways. I could hop up and go and, my angry dad voice say, what did you do to your brother? Or I could ask him, was there a reason that happened? Or what happened before that? And get the child to engage their thinking processes to work backwards from the point where they felt attacked, right? The point where they are at effect. Go backwards in time with them. Just ask them questions and be curious and give them the chance to do the mental work to connect the cause with the result. And leading them through that process over and over and over again teaches them how to do it for themselves. And so you giving them the space to work out the problem themselves will create children who grow up to be adults who really can solve any problem.
That's a powerful way to look at it. You know, I've heard of a lot of parents out there having a hard time with kids saying it's time to go.
Mm, yeah. And that's something that, from a neurological perspective is really perfectly natural for children because they haven't learned how to associate themselves with time yet. Especially when they're really small. And, you know, from a biomechanical perspective, if we're going to go into the quantum field, our reality exists here. Time exists because our mind is like a prism that brings all of the potentials, all of the possible choices we could make down into one single moment. And then we create those moments over and over and over again. That's what becomes our memories. But we don't live in those memories. We can't physiologically go back there, right? The only thing that exists for us is this present moment. And so learning how to access the concept of time is something that a lot of children, I'd say all children, need assistance doing. And so one of the really easy tools that you can do is to give them something like this, which I happen to have here. This is a little sand timer. This one is for 5 minutes. So giving a child cues prior to the event is incredibly helpful for their system to start processing and thinking in terms of time. So instead of saying, "It's time to go, Johnny, I need you to put your coat and boots on right now," and the child is in the middle of play, you walk in and you surprise them with this instruction, they're immediately going to go into a fear state, and their system is going to react as though they're being threatened, because what are they doing? They're in the middle of something that they really enjoy. You're tearing them away from that. And so they have that fear of, I can't have it right now. There isn't enough for me, in this case, enough time for me to enjoy myself. And I can't have enough of what I want. And so they have a fear response, which comes out in a tantrum. Instead, if you do something like this, you say, okay, I'm going to set the timer. In 5 minutes, we're going to go. You can play up until that time, but when this timer runs out, it's time for us to put on our boots and our coats and walk out the door. That gives them something to prepare themselves with mentally, emotionally. They can notice that and they can look at the timer, right? And see, oh, this is how much time I have left. And that is a really, really powerful tool for teaching them how to associate time and how to mentally learn how to prepare themselves for things that are going to come. Because what happens if the child doesn't learn those skills and doesn't learn how to process time is they can oftentimes end up, being an adult who is constantly running late and is goes into that fear state. Often they wait until the very last second, and then they jump in the car and they have 6 minutes to get where they're going, but it's a 10-minute drive. And as an adult, a lot of times people who exhibit those behaviors, and I used to be one of them, they'll be driving along and they'll say in their mind, I can make it in 6 minutes. And if there is nothing in their way, absolutely they could. The problem is that everyone else is not in the same rush that they are, and so they get stuck behind traffic, and then they blame the traffic for their problems rather than learning to recognize that they created the situation through their choices. Does that make sense? Is that landing with you?
I resonate with it because I always say to myself is if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late.
Mm-hmm. That's a
So
great
that's
rule to live
something.
by.
It's a rule I live by, and I'm kind of telling other people to do it as well, and it's working out for them as well.
Yeah, and it's a very practical tool, and it's representative of the bigger issue, which is people's dissociation with time, and two, with the tendency of everyone on planet Earth to allow themselves to be put at the effect of others. And you basically have two choices when it comes to how you live your life. You can either live at cause, or you can live at effect. And I can break that down for you a little bit to explain what that means, really. If I get in the car and I have a 10-minute drive and I have 6 minutes to get there, and the whole way there, I blame the vehicles that are keeping me from getting there in the time that I want to get there, I am living at the effect of the choices of other people. Because I am saying there is nothing I could have done. I essentially am a victim here. Things are happening to me because other people made choices, and those are keeping me from doing what I want to do. Now, that is one way to live, but I would posit to you that it is not the best way to live, because all that does is get you reasons for the behavior. It gets you reasons for what's going on, and it never gets you the results that you want. In order to shift that to create the reality that you want, where you're always on time and you're seen as a person who is ready to go and is in charge of their life, you have to be willing to take charge of yourself. And you have to be willing to ask yourself the question, how can I be at cause for my creation of this reality? And, the car example is a really simple one, because obviously, like you said, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. You can choose to say, what could I have done differently to create a different reality for myself? And, in that case, in that scenario, the easy answer is I could have left earlier. I could have made
Mhm.
choices before then that prepared me for my departure. And people are walking around on planet Earth here, living at the effect of everything around them. That goes right back to what we were talking about earlier, political climate, people at work, everything in your environment is either putting you at cause or it's putting you at effect. And if, as a person, you recognize that situation, then you can start to take control of your life in all of the ways, in every area, because what you do in one thing, in one area, is what you do in most areas. So
Now,
if
can
you
you
decide,
unpack this for me? Because I want you to, for the listeners, people watching,
yep,
how does self-talk shape the body, not just the mind?
that's a great one, Matthew. So, really it ties right back to what we talked about at the beginning, your values and identities. A study was done in Europe. We'll use this as an example. A study was done in Europe a few years ago. They studied 60,000 people who had cancer. And in this study, what they were trying to figure out was, what's the correlation here? What do all these people have in common? And what they discovered is going to shock you. They did the numbers and they looked at their past history, the last 3 years prior to their diagnosis. And what they discovered was that 98% of those people they studied had had a significant emotional event. That would be, one that is something that was really felt traumatic to the person, right? And what they would have described as traumatic. They had one of these events, and it was something that was unexpected, isolating, that they didn't have a strategy for, and it felt dramatic to them. If those 4 filters were applied, 98% of within 3 years, these people developed cancer. And so what that demonstrates is, all those terms may be a little gobbledygook for the standard person who's listening to this podcast. So I'll break it down a little bit more simply. Basically, what it meant was everyone who felt like something had happened to them and who believed that they were a hapless victim in the sense that they had no control or no agency over this event, developed cancer within 3 years. So,
Can I ask you, what's one phrase people should stop saying to themselves immediately?
well, let's see, where could I start? One phrase people should stop saying them to themselves immediately is "I can't." That is probably the number one. If you I can't remember, I can't do that, I can't help myself. Anytime you start a sentence with those 2 words, you are giving yourself a command, right? That is not opening up, or that is not leaving any possibility for you to be able to do, say, or be that thing that you are talking about. You're giving yourself an instruction which your body is going to respond to. So stop saying, I can't get up and go to work today. I can't go work out at the gym. I can't make all of these appointments happen. And start asking instead, how can I? Because if there's a way, you have to ask yourself what that way is in order to find it. And you're never going to find it by telling yourself that there is no way. It's impossible, right? You're telling yourself this is something that absolutely cannot be done. And so what does your mind do? When you give it instructions, it follows them. If you tell yourself I can't, then your mind sits there and goes, well, okay, I guess we can't then. And it's never going to say, no, you're wrong. We actually can, right? It's going to give you the things that you give it instructions for. So instead of saying, I can't, you say, how can I get all of this done? Or even, I don't know how yet, but I'm figuring it out. Because you are, however it feels for you in the moment. And that's really what it comes down to, is the feeling that a person has creates that self-talk. And so they experienced something one time where they didn't figure something out, and that gets generalized by that unconscious part of the mind that creates behaviors into all of the similar situations that you experience in the future. It gets projected out into the future, so that when a future incident becomes present for you, you experience something like you experienced in the past. Well, the mind remembers that you weren't able to figure out a solution then. And so it fast forwards now. Oh, yeah, no, we checked and we can't do that. So, so people literally talk themselves out of all sorts of fantastic things in their life. I mean, you apply that to any area. I can't apply for this promotion because I'm not ready yet. I can't go skydiving because I have a fear of heights. Pick a subject, every single area of your life that you are using these commands in. You are stopping yourself. No one else is stopping you, right? No one is coming up behind you and grabbing you and say, no, you're not going to be able to do this because I'm holding you back. The only person that's holding you back is the voice inside of your head telling you that you're unable to do this.
I love that because you are a big reason for this podcast being so successful. Because in the beginning of the podcast, I had changed my wording up a little bit because you told me in the last podcast, you should tell people to remember to subscribe. So I
That's right.
changed up my whole beginning of my podcast. Could you unpack a couple more ideas like that?
Absolutely. And that's really cool. I appreciate, you are such a good listener and you are so coachable and teachable. It's an incredibly powerful skill to have and to develop that. And I encourage all of the listeners hearing this today, learn how to be coachable, because if you put aside that ego, that fear that something bad is going to happen and I need to defend myself from whatever is coming at me, and instead just accept everything that is coming at you and ask, how can I use this to empower myself? You can create an entirely new identity, which will lead to an entirely new life for you.
That is
Just
so true because, even in the morning when people come talk to me at work, they go, how are you doing? Good morning and this and that. And, they can always ask you like how you're doing. And you can always say like, I'm blessed and highly favored,
That's right. Absolutely.
or I'm doing wonderful.
Yep.
It's just not the simple, yeah, I'm doing good.
Exactly. The more, and this is something that has been studied extensively. The most powerful emotion that you can have, that the most powerful state that you can use, is the state of gratitude. And if you are able to put aside the way that you're feeling right this second and speak, I'm grateful, even if you don't know how you're grateful yet, if you can say that, it automatically becomes more likely. And this is, they've done tons and tons of studies about how gratitude changes your biochemistry. They've done studies about this was an incidental study, right? So they were studying rabbits and how the food that they were eating affected their bodies. So they were feeding them junk food, right? They're giving them garbage, and so they're measuring, testing to see, and testing them against the control group, what was going to happen to these rabbits.
You are what you eat.
You are what you eat, and at the same time, if you eat with the proper mindset, you can biophysically change the molecular structure of how your body absorbs that food. So I'm not suggesting that you go out and eat a diet of McDonald's, because the building blocks, are not, they're questionable at best. But what the study showed is that you can change how your body processes food through intention. So this study they did had these rabbits, they're feeding them garbage. And this one group of rabbits that should have been gaining weight and, increasing all of their obesity markers like the other groups, was not. And the scientists were absolutely confounded. They had no idea, like, what is going on, how these rabbits are showing similar levels to the control group, which is getting healthy food. What is going on? And so they investigated, and what they found out was that this one particular group of rabbits, the person who was in charge of caring for them, every time they fed the rabbits, they picked them up and they stroked them and they talked positively to them as they were giving them the food. And the other rabbits weren't getting that positive affirmation. They were not getting that positive energy from the person who was, feeding them. And so they were getting obese and having all of the genetic markers and, eventually liver disease, all that stuff. But the group that was being fed with love and gratitude was not responding in the same way. So the things that you are what you eat in a certain sense, right? At the same time, you can alter how what you eat creates who you are. Does that make sense? Is that landing with you? Because you've got, they've done a ton of studies as well. They went further with this, and they looked at how for instance, a mother who's preparing food for her children, what they discovered was that the state that the mother is in when she is making the food has a measurable effect on essentially the nutritional value of the food when it's given to the children to eat. If a mother is in a negative state and running stories about how, upset she is about, whatever, it could be the husband, at the kids, at, all these things that are stressing her out, and she's making this meal, she's, in a very real sense, putting negative energy into that food. And when the children ate the food, they experienced negative results. Their health markers went down, their nutritional indexes were altered, and they didn't receive the same nutrition. So like their weight and everything decreased.
So you're telling me this can work the opposite way as well?
Absolutely it can. Yes. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. And so if instead of that, they focused on positivity and love, the children showed marked increases in their nutritional markers, their healthy weight gain increased dramatically, over the control groups. So whatever you focus on, whatever you pour your energy into, you are going to increase. I don't know if we talked about this, but we did an experiment, my children and I, last year, and it was to see how our intentions can affect our reality. Did we talk about this in the I don't remember. It was specifically with rice. So we did this experiment. We took, and this is something I encourage everybody to do because it is the most incredible thing. I knew kind of what the experiment was going to, do, because I'd read a bunch and studied. I didn't pull this experiment out of thin air, right? But I was still amazed at the actual results. So here's what you do. You take a pot of rice, just white rice, shelled, as basic as it gets. You pour in your water and you cook it just like you would if you were going to eat it, right? Then you take that rice and you scoop it out into 3 containers. Put equal amounts into each container. Get 3 containers of the same. Doesn't matter what the container is. And then you're going to put 3 labels on. On one of those, you're going to label love. On the next one, you're going to label hate. And the last one, you're going to label ignore. Okay? 3 containers, all the same, except for the labels that you put on them. Then you're going to do an experiment for 2 weeks. And I would suggest putting a cover on them so they don't spill out, because we'll get to why in a second. But put them in a container that you can put a cover on. For 2 weeks, you're going to do 2 very specific things. Every day, you are going to take the container that says love out. You're going to hold it in your hands, and you're going to speak words of love to that container of rice. I love you. You're amazing. You're wonderful. I appreciate you. You are so fantastic. It is awesome that you are here. Things like that. 5 minutes or less. I mean, you can even do it for a minute or two. It doesn't take a huge amount of time. All it needs is consistency. So every day you're going to do this. Second thing you're going to do is you're going to pull out the container of rice labeled hate, and you're going to speak words of hatred to it. You're the worst. You're awful. I hate you. You suck. You're going to speak literal insults to it. Now, as a general rule, those are things that I would say never, never, ever say. But for purposes of this experiment, you are going to encounter some incredible results. So that's what we did. 2 weeks, every single day, all of us would take it out, and for a minute or two, we would speak to each of those 2 cups. The one that was labeled ignore, we just ignored. We didn't do anything with it. We never touched it, didn't take it out, just left it where it was. But they all sat in the same spot in the same cupboard together. At the end of 2 weeks, we opened all 3 of the containers to see what effect our words had had on this dead cooked rice. What do you suppose was the result? Just high level, like what do you think happened with the rice that said love on it? You guess?
I'm guessing it. What would rice do?
What would rice do if you
Yeah.
spoke words of love to it for 2 weeks? I was curious to know. Because it's dead, right? It's been cooked. There is no life in it. Well, would you believe just the act of transmitting our energy through our words created new life in that rice? Now, the rice itself didn't, blossom or bloom, whatever rice does when it, becomes a plant again. But what happened was a mycelium grew in that container of rice. And unlike, the things that you think of when you conceive of mold, this mycelium was incredibly sweet smelling. It was like a pungent, sweet, fruity sort of odor. And when I took the cap off, I was like surprised because what I saw was, dark gray, almost like charcoal colored mycelium. I'm like, oh no, mold. But the odor that assailed my nostrils was completely unlike any mold I'd ever smelled. So the act of creating that state of love in the rice allowed new life to grow where there was nothing but death. Now, we next opened the can that said hate on it. What do you suppose happened with that one?
Was it moldy?
That's what I was expecting. No, it was not moldy at all. Would you believe that the only thing that had happened to that rice in 2 weeks was that it had decayed and rotted? There was no life at all, just more death. And it smelled awful. I pulled it out, and you could see, this is why I say to use the same amount in all of your containers, because you could see a difference. There was less rice left because at the bottom there was this gelatinous, gooey, disgusting smelling liquid because the
You
rice
must
had
have been speaking some bad things to that rice.
we all were, yes, because that was the point, was to see what the difference was. But just to see same 2 cans of rice from the same pot sitting next to each other, the only difference was what we said to it. One grew new life. The other didn't even grow nasty life. It literally just rotted away. Now, here's where it gets really, really interesting. And this goes back to what we've been talking about, especially when it comes to fathers and transferring states to their children. The can that we ignored for 2 weeks, when we pulled that out and took its lid off, I want you to guess for me, Matthew. What do you suppose happened to that can? Because we had said absolutely nothing to it for 2 weeks. It was completely ignored. It was just
I'm
sitting
gonna
there.
guess nothing happened to it.
Would you believe that can of rice, which was ignored for 2 weeks, was 5 times worse than the can that had the word hate on it? It smelled worse, and it was measurably much more decayed. than the
So,
one
what do you learn from all of this experiment?
that is the question, Matthew. What did we learn? Just like the rice, a child or an adult, a big child, child in a big body, will always prefer and always respond better to negative attention than they will to being ignored. And that's why, and that's, I'm speaking specifically to the parents here, that's why your child is behaving or misbehaving when you are around. It is because they would rather have your wrath, your anger, whatever outburst, however you respond to them, they would rather have that than nothing at all. Because just like the rice, it is 5 times worse for them to get ignored than it is to receive negative energy.
That is fascinating. Can you tell me more?
Yeah. What that
So,
means is,
how can you use this today with kids?
yeah, what that means is as a parent, the energy that you give to your children is having a very real impact. And what that comes down to is like like the dead rice, right? If you can affect that dead rice to that degree, how much more are you affecting the living, breathing child who is alive in front of you with your energy, with your words? When you say things in a loving way towards your children, and that includes discipline, right? When you transfer your state of calmness when they are experiencing a moment of panic and fear, when they're having a meltdown, when they lose their minds and go into that, neurological space where all they can do is cry, scream, and they're inconsolable. When you can maintain your state and say, your feelings are valid, the behavior is still unacceptable, you can relax, you can calm, we can get through this. I'm right here with you. You can come alongside of your child rather than increasing the level of rapport that's being broken by shouting back at them. That allows them the neurological space to calm themselves and to get out of that fear state. Because in the fear state, they are not thinking. That part of your brain, the logical part of the brain, that's shut off. There is nothing that you are going to say to them in that moment that is going to reason them out of the state that they're in.
Wow. This is, with you doing this experiment, is this why you believe parents need to be present for the kids?
Absolutely. It was such an incredible moment of clarity for me. Even having done all the work that I've done, all the studies that I've done, just being able to see physically what happens when you direct your energy in specific ways was a huge watershed moment for me. And a big part of the reason that I've been increasing my focus, especially for fathers, and how to show up better for their children. Because, the fact of the matter is, I was not always a great parent. Um, when my children were younger, I had a lot of emotional outbursts. I responded in anger a lot of times because I didn't have any resources. I didn't know how else to handle it, because I wasn't in control of my own state. I was at the effect of theirs. Just like we talked about earlier, when a person comes into a room full of strangers, they can put them all in a fear state. Same is true of us, right? And when I said earlier that we're just children in big bodies, what I meant is that most of us just walking around do not have the emotional infrastructure in place neurologically to separate someone else's behavior and emotional state from our own. And so we affect our children through our states and they affect us through theirs. And so my work is focused right now around especially helping fathers to start with controlling their state and insulating themselves, learning how to insulate themselves from the emotional outbursts that come from their children so that they can begin to teach them that calmness that they can imprint on them neurologically.
Sawyer, let me ask you, I mean, what pressures do dads face today that didn't exist years ago?
That's a great question, Matthew. There's a lot. We live in very, very interesting times. And, you see, from my perspective, I see fatherhood and the, strong male leadership role under attack in a lot of different areas. The media, social media, especially the movies and TV shows. I challenge you to show me a movie or TV show where the father figure is present, accountable to himself, raises his children with integrity, and is not made to look a fool. They don't exist. Every single portrayal of a father going back 30, 40 years shows them to be some sort of buffoon. They're an idiot. The mother is always having to, save them from themselves. And they're an absent father who is, pursuing their career at all costs, including the cost of their children. And so you've got this mindset where you're getting inundated with this belief from all sorts of different areas. And it's never been harder for fathers to have a focused, resilient fatherhood because we're constantly being distracted by all of the things, social media and all of those sorts of things make it so easy for us as fathers to focus on the phone when the child is right here, screaming for attention. And this is not, meant as a value judgment against anyone. I have to manage myself as well. It is something that is so prevalent that even people like me who are not only aware but do techniques specifically to avoid falling into those pitfalls, still have to watch myself. I still have to be cognizant. And if I'm doing something, because even if you're doing something productive, right? Even if you're on your phone, you're sending emails to people, you're doing something that is genuinely productive. If a child comes up to you and asks you a question, just give you a visual example here for those who are watching. If I'm doing something on my phone here and I'm working, you can't see that, but I know that I'm working. And you come up to me and you say, "Daddy, look at this picture that I just drew." And I say, "Yeah, honey, that's really nice. You did a really good job. You should be proud of yourself." That child is not getting my attention. Even if the words that I said were encouraging, positive, and empowering, that's not enough to cancel out the fact that what's more important to me in this moment is looking at this screen rather than looking at my child. If I don't make eye contact, for those of you who are listening and watching, what I did was looking at my phone and talking to the person while I was continuing to look at the phone screen. If that's how you show up as a father to your children, what you're teaching them is that daddy doesn't have time and that I can't get the attention that I want when I want it from daddy.
I like
Now,
that example a lot because let's just say that father, like you said, was working on something.
mhm,
How can the father protect the kids emotionally during uncertain times?
that's really, really important, Matthew, because what that's going to teach the child is that they have to look elsewhere for that attention or they have to seek it negatively, right? And so, as a father, one of the most important things that you can do is become aware of when your child is seeking your attention. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Become aware of when your child is seeking your attention and give it to them. Most of the time, a child is not looking for a really, they want your full attention, but they don't need it for a really long time. If you give them the love and affection and the attention that they're looking for, it usually doesn't take very long. They're looking for that assurance, for that touch, and for that quality moment with you, to let them know that you're there, you are present as a father, and you are there for them and can give them what they need when they need it. Once they get that assurance, they're usually good to go and they'll go run off happy and in a, really positive state. So just as fathers, I cannot stress this enough. As a father, your child needs you to be able to break state with whatever you're doing and just direct your literal focus on them, because where your attention goes, your energy flows, and they will feel that immediately. So you give them that 2 minutes, you encourage them, and child comes up to you and says, Daddy, Daddy, look at this. I drew this picture for you. Take a moment, look at the picture. And here's something that is really, really helpful that's going to create very positive benefits for your child years from now. Rather than saying, oh, you did such a good job, I'm so proud of you, which builds the child's self-esteem, say this instead. Say, wow, it looks like you worked really hard on this. Do you like it? Especially if the child comes up to you and asks you that question. If they come up and say, I do this for you, Daddy, do you like it? You say, wow, it looks like you worked really hard on this. Do you like it? And what that does neurologically is causes the child to, instead of looking to other people for validation, go inside of themselves and check internally. And this is going to pay huge dividends for them later down the road, because they're no longer going to be at the effect of other people's opinions of them. They'll be able to look inside and go, oh, that's not true, or yes, I'm good with that. So what you're doing is building those neurological muscles. So when you ask them, when you hand them that question back, say, what do you think about it? Do you like it? And the child's going to say, yeah, I really like it. And then you come back and reinforce that belief by saying, I really like it too. Like I said, you did a really good job, and I can tell you worked really hard at it. And the most important thing you can do for a child is reinforce their behavior rather than the outcome. So tell them that you can tell that they put a lot of effort into it, rather than saying, wow, that's really amazing. You did the best job ever, which is good. But if you reinforce the fact that they put effort into it, that creates a neurological system where the child values the effort that they put into themselves rather than the results. And what that eventually means is that they get better results because they're putting in more effort. Is that making sense?
So, do you focus with father's emotional state, because it affects the whole house?
That's right. That's right. And that's the core. That's where it starts, right? You have to be able to manage that state yourself. And so doing, work like we said at the beginning, writing down what you believe about yourself. And you can do this in lots of contexts, but you can specifically say, okay, what do I believe about myself as a father? And then write those beliefs down, look at them, and determine whether they are serving you. And then the next thing is to ask yourself, what new beliefs do I want to have about myself instead? And then you can start doing the work to replace the negative belief that's no longer serving you with a new positive belief. And once you accept that about yourself, and it should be something that motivates you to action, right? So instead of a belief like, I'm an amazing father, you say, I am a powerful father who shows up as a leader for his children and exemplifies what it means to be present. That's the identity that is going to get you those behaviors.
I like that how you said that, because it just reminds me of leadership. The father is the head. He is trying to lead his family on to the greatest life they can live. I mean, what does leadership look like for a father at home?
Yeah, absolutely. Fathers, if they lead with themselves first, if they lead with their state first, the next thing to do to demonstrate that leadership to their children is to help their children to get into those states. And, there's tons of specific techniques that father can do with his children to get them out of negative states and into positive states. But that constant reinforcement, every chance you get, rewarding their effort, describing how much of a problem solver they are, teaching them to repeat mantras that empower them to action and to believe that they are capable of anything. Those are how a dad today can really insulate and protect their children from the outside. Because really, Matthew, we talked about social media, but not in the context of kids, right? Children today are being exposed to a world that we as children couldn't even imagine. You know, the amount of screen time that a child has today, say a 10-year-old kid has today, versus when we were 10, is just, it's almost immeasurable, right? Even kids who had lots of TV time or whatever as a kid, for us that would have been like a couple hours, maybe 3 hours, right? Now you've got 10-year-olds who they have a smartphone and they're on their device 5, 6, 7 hours a day sometimes. And so what that means for them is they have an exponentially greater amount of exposure to potentially negative beliefs and negative messages that can create fear and instability in themselves. And if you look at how much we can be affected by the news that is full of voices, it doesn't matter, again, wherever you're at in the political spectrum, the cries of terror and foul and all of the negative messages that are being sent out and broadcast, it's so much harder for a child to insulate themselves mentally and emotionally from those messages. And so what happens is they install specific identities and beliefs in themselves through hearing other people say them, right? And so for us, that means we install positive identities and we take steps in the physical to protect them from negative identities from others. One little trick that I teach my kids: if you hear someone say something negative towards you, firstly, inside you're going to say delete, delete, delete. So you've got a little window of opportunity between when you hear something and when it goes into your brain and is accepted by it. And in that little window, you can instruct it, right? We talked about earlier. You say, I can't. You're giving yourself an instruction. If you think about what you just heard and tell yourself to delete it, it's much easier for you to stop that thought from being internalized and becoming part of your beliefs. So teaching your kids to stop the beliefs at the door, right? When you see the big bad wolf of negative energy coming at you, you shut the door. You don't let it in. Teaching them specific tools like that is really, really helpful. And then reinforcing them with positive beliefs. Say if someone says something like, "Oh, you're stupid," you say, "Delete, delete, delete. I am intelligent and resourceful." Replace it with the positive identity that you want to have instead. So you teach yourself how to do these things, and then you teach your children. What's going to happen for them is they're going to have an exponentially greater quality of life because they're learning them from infancy, right?
I love that because, you're a leader and you're teaching how to handle stress to your kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You are teaching them, state management. That's what it is. Feeling stressed. That's a state that a person can get into, and teaching them how to and leading them out of those negative states into positive states that's what parenthood is all about, right? If you can teach that to your children, you have been a successful parent. You have parented successfully.
Now, what's the first habit dad should focus on changing?
I would say by and large, the biggest change that will produce the most results is really intentionally practicing gratitude, because we are, as modern fathers, like I said before, inundated with tons of negative messages about fathers in general and about how we are as dads and how good we are as dads. Replacing our negative self talk, the things that we've accepted about ourselves as fathers, with gratitude, saying, I'm so thankful for my children. I'm so thankful for this day. You wake up in the morning, you have a choice about how you are going to live your day, right? And I know you know this because you do this. We've talked about this as well. You wake up in the morning and you have the choice to either say, this day is going to be amazing. I can't wait to find out how amazing this day is. Or you wake up and you start running all the old stories from all of the past events that felt negative to you. And you set the mood, you set the tone for how the rest of your day is going to go. So here is the phrase that I would suggest everyone memorize, have it sink deeply into your mind, your body, and your spirit. And I'm going to say this: nothing is worth more than this day. If you live your life like that is true, just imagine how much differently you're going to show up in every single area.
I
Because
love that. I love that because that's why they call it the present, and that's because it's a gift.
exactly, you don't know, the time you have left here is the something that you don't know and you don't get to know. It could be today. This could be the last one. Are you appreciating every moment that you have here while you have it? And if you start with that belief, nothing is worth more than this day, you're going to create new behaviors that match that belief.
Now, can you unpack this? How do you use abundance with this? There's
Oh,
gratitude, and like my buddy at work, I told him if he finds money, he always say money comes to me in abundance, but if he finds money, have that gratitude with it.
absolutely. Absolutely. Every single time. Saying the two magic words we were taught from the time you're 2 years old: thank you. Thank you. And saying it everywhere. This is something that is so simple, but it actually, from a neuroscience perspective, it has an incredibly powerful effect on a person's ability to have abundance in their life, right? Where your energy goes, I'm sorry, where your focus goes, your energy flows, right? So if you focus on those abundance, every time something happens, this is something that I absolutely love about my wife. She's amazing. She has this habit of responding to all kinds of things, right? They may not be necessarily positive things, but she responds by saying thank you. And it's been such an inspiration to me because I'll be honest, I didn't have that habit before I met her. and it's just so amazing because those two words don't just affect you, they affect everyone who hears them. And so you go through the grocery store and someone says something to you, you respond first with thank you. Say even somebody bumped into you and say, "Oh, I'm sorry." You say, "Thank you. We're good." Those words create a positive, what we call an image inside of the mind, in that person's mind, that is going to, you're essentially talking about state transfer, right? Just like the fear state can be transferred, the state of gratitude can be transferred as well. And
Yeah,
so
I say a saying, this is so bad, this has to be good.
that is certainly one way of looking at it. Yeah. You have the ability, whether you realize it or not yet, to have gratitude for every situation. So somebody pulls out in front of you and is driving really, really slow. You have two choices. You can say, "This is terrible. I'm going to be late. Why is this person doing this? I wish they would go away." Or you can say, "Thank you for helping me to maintain my speed and to get where I'm going safely." same situation, two totally different beliefs, which create two totally different results inside you. And when you start doing that externally, just the observation of that is going to create that state in your children. When they hear mommy and daddy saying thank you when somebody pulls out in front of them, the first time they're going to be like, what are you saying thank you for? Because in the past, what they've heard is a whole string of expletives and lots of angry gestures, right? The first time you do this, your kids are going to be like, what's going on? Because they will notice. They are very attuned to your states. And so they're paying attention. Whether you are aware of it or not, they are highly aware of your states as a father, as a parent. And so giving them that gift, that blessing of accepting things with gratitude. And really, again, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. The words that you say create different feelings inside of you. This is something that's been shown. You can laugh. You can force yourself to laugh, right? You may be feeling terrible at the moment, but within a couple of minutes, if you continue to force yourself to laugh, fake laugh, your mind doesn't know that there's no reason for the laughter. It just recognizes the biochemical signals inside of you laughing. So what does it do? It creates the neurochemicals and dumps them into your pleasure centers that mimic the effects of real laughter. You can completely change your state just by faking the function, because that will create the result. You literally can change your mind with your words. You just start laughing. Ha 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 ha. Doesn't matter if you're having fun. You will start to feel that because your brain is looking for feedback, and the feedback that you give it's going to use to create a state for you.
You know, this also could be used the opposite direction as well. I mean, how does your body store emotional memories?
Oh, that's a great question, Matthew. Your body, the way that I would answer that is in two ways. So your body stores emotional memories, one, in the physical space that is your body, right? And the way that it does that is it transfers those emotions through the fascial tissue, which is really only just beginning to be understood. There's a lot of cutting edge research that's still being done, but essentially, if you conceptualize like expanded cardboard, it's got a whole bunch of perforations in it. You stretch it out, and you've got a bunch of holes, right? So you take that piece of cardboard and you kind of wad it up, and then you spray it full of whipped cream. So it's the whipped cream is filling up all of the holes. The whipped cream is the muscle tissue, and the cardboard, the perforated cardboard, is the fascia. So the fascia travels through and interweaves with all of your muscle fibers. It moves emotions physically in the body, and you can test this out for yourself by thinking about a time when you felt really, really angry at something, right? We can just go ahead and test this real quick. You go ahead and think about a time when you were really, really upset, when something just infuriated you. Do you have something in mind?
I do.
Yeah. Where are you feeling it in your body right now? Where is it strongest for you?
In the center of my chest.
That's where the emotion of anger is stored for you. You can feel it right there. Okay. Now I want you to smell popcorn for me. Can you smell cheddar popcorn?
Yes, I can do that.
All right. So are you still feeling the emotion of anger?
No.
Good. So that's just a little trick to break your state, because I don't want you sitting in that state of anger, right? I want you.
Okay, that's a good way to
Yeah.
think about it. So you're telling me a mother can transfer emotional states through to its offspring?
Absolutely, absolutely, and this has been demonstrated in tons of neurological studies. They did the study with mice where they had them run through a maze. We may have talked about this before, but to reiterate, they ran these mice through a maze. At a certain point in the maze, they shocked the mice, right? They're lab mice. They're going to live probably terrible lives. So they shock the mice at the same point in this maze, run them through over and over and over again, creating a emotional and physiological reaction. Then they bred those mice and they sent the mouse babies, once they grew up, they sent them through the same maze, but they did not apply the shock. They just had them run through the maze. And those mice experienced the same physiological reaction as their parents had at the same point in the maze, as if they had received the shock. Not only that, they did this for 4 consecutive generations of mice, and the 4th generation were still able to experience the same physiological reaction in the maze as their great-grandparents had, even though only the great-grandparents had received the shock in the maze.
That's
Think about
interesting.
that. That is incredibly powerful indicator for how we can transfer emotional states to our children.
Just with the experiment you just did, though, I mean, why do emotions show up years later?
That's a really great question. So, from a biochemical perspective, like we talked about, the emotion is stored physically in the body, and you can figure out where your emotions are stored by thinking about that specific emotion and then noticing where it is strongest for you, right? So we did that. You can go through that with all of the emotions and find out where your body is storing them physically for you. But here's the thing. What happens when that emotion gets stored is essentially your body creates an energetic field that is holding that emotion in your body still alive. Essentially, there's a part of you that is experiencing that emotional event continuously from the time it happened until now. Because if it weren't still there, you would not be able to feel it, right? If you can remember that time and go back and feel that emotion, it means that it is still there. It has not gone away. Now, my mentor, Reg Malhotra, fantastic guy, very, very intelligent. He came up with this concept that he calls the energy cube. And essentially, what it is the idea that our bodies are like a cube that holds energetic events, or holds energy on events. So you go through life and say, you're 2 years old and your parents are shouting and screaming at you. You experience what we call a significant emotional event, something that is really impactful to your beliefs. And what happens is the emotions that you feel, fear, the anger, the sadness, whatever those negative emotions are, they get stored physiologically in your body. And you go through life collecting these emotions. If they don't get released, they just stack up over time. Think of yourself like a computer, right? You've got your memory, and then you have your RAM. And the memory banks get full over time if you don't defrag, remove old programs, things like that. They stack up. And what happens when that memory gets full? Well, bugs, glitches, computer doesn't function right, it's slow. And the same is true of our physical bodies, because in that way, we're very, very similar. So we collect all of these emotional events through our life. You're a teenager as a boy, and you're in high school, and you do something silly, and all these teenage girls are laughing at you and making fun of you. That can be a huge emotion. That can take up, half a dozen spaces in your energy cube, right? Just from that one thing. Then you get a little bit older and you're dating and you have a bad breakup. Oh, there's a few more spaces. You go a little bit further in life and, you have a parent fall ill or something like that. So all of these events continually stack up inside and take up space energetically. What that ends up doing to the body is, like we talked about earlier, chronic illness, cancer, all sorts of physiological ailments as a result of holding all of that negative energy live and active inside of yourself. So, one of the things that I do as a practitioner is go through a specific process or series of processes that mechanically allow the person to remove the energetic charge that they have on those memories and let go of it so that it is actually, cleared out, just like defragging a computer or deleting old programs in a computer. You remove them, you clear up more space neurologically for yourself. You can tell when a person has a really full energy cube cache because things make them go off the handle. Something happens, so they drop their phone on the floor, and it's a string of expletives because they lost control of their phone for a second. Things that are over the top, especially. You say something to your wife or girlfriend that you really didn't intend to be mean or hurtful, but suddenly they're in tears, bawling. Those are the kind of things that are just really indicative of how full a person's energy cube can get. And so if you don't clear those things out, if you don't do the process to release them, they just go on living inside of your body and creating physiological problems for you down the road. And the more of those you have stacked up inside, the more problems and the worse they get, and the harder it becomes for your cells to function and to recover from illness or injury.
Now, how can some people achieve more emotional positivity?
Well, so there are two perfect times to do something, Matthew. The first is when it should have been done, and the second is right now. So there's, from that perspective, there's nothing you can do about all of the emotions that you have stored unless you're willing to go through and do the processes, and there's a very specific process called timeline therapy, which is incredibly powerful. It works really fast. It's not like therapy in the traditional sense where you're sitting and talking to someone and telling them about your problems. It's a very mechanical process that allows you to let go of those emotions and release them for good. And it's incredibly, incredibly effective. It changed my life, and that's my why. How I got into this work was just seeing how it affected me, and where I was at versus where I am now.
So let's just say someone, how stress gets passed down without any words to some people. Is there a way to get rid of that type of stress? And then is there a possibility to achieve a different type of powerful, more of like, you want to fill up your box with different emotions? Is it can you go into a different emotional state you've never been into?
So that's a really interesting question. And the way that I would answer that is to say, if you can conceive of a way for you to do that, yes, absolutely. What you have to be able to do is to imagine what it would be like to have that state. Okay. And a lot of people are able to do that. A lot of people are able to imagine what that state would be like and conceive it. If you can conceive it, you can make it real. Okay. Because the mind, this is going to sound crazy to a lot of people, but the mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. It doesn't know the difference between the past and the future. It doesn't know the difference between you and everyone else. And the neuroscience is very clear on this. Essentially, what that means is if you can create a image of you having something, achieving something, being something, and you can make it real, that is, you create it with your mind. You have three ways. You have sounds, pictures, and feelings. That's how all of your memories are stored. That's how all of your experience is lived, through those three things. You can't have an experience without them. If you can create a picture of yourself with sounds that are meaningful to you and connect it to a feeling that you want to have, your mind, and make it real for yourself. If you can, and we do specific processes in the work that I do to mechanically create this reality for you. It is
Is it
just
almost as if like you want to get into a car, visualize the car, have the smell, what it smells like, the leather, what it feels like, kind of like that?
yes, yes. So think of the things that create or make up your memories. If you can take those elements, which you take those elements and you create a new memory, a future memory of something that you are going to experience in the future, it is just as real to your mind as the one that you remember in the past. And so if you can create that future and you go through specific steps, you make it specific, it needs to be positive and realistic. You create those images for yourself and feel into them, right? Because you want to sit down, and if you're using the car example, right, you want to imagine what it's like to sit in the seat and feel the seat. This is a Ford Mustang. This is a sports car. Whatever. For this example, this is so cool. It's the most amazing thing ever. You create that image, you create that feeling. Oh, what it would be like to sit in the seat of one of those. The leather, everything feels rich and expensive. Whatever it is, those things, those details that are important to you, you conceptualize them and you say, all right, this is July 1st, 2026. And I'm walking onto the car lot, and I see the car that I want. You visualize exactly what it is. It's a red Ford Mustang with white racing stripes. And you walk up to the car and you see yourself opening the door and you feel the handle as you open it. You step inside and you feel the seat. If you can create that image for yourself, you automatically can create behaviors that will help you to achieve that goal of having that Mustang. Because if you assume the identity, your mind will automatically create behaviors that align with it, because that identity controls the behaviors. Is that landing with you?
Mm-hmm.
So you can do that with all kinds of things. You can do that for relationships. You can do that for your job, for your career, for things that you want, any goal that you want to set for yourself. Say I know you're seeing someone right now. If you want to have a fantastic marriage to this person, you can set a goal for yourself. Say, okay, it's, July 1st, 2027. And I'm walking down the aisle with this person, and you visualize what it would be like, what you're going to see, who's going to be there supporting you. You're going to hear people saying, Matthew, I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy for you. This is the most amazing person for you that you could have ever chosen, right? You're going to feel the feelings of joy and excitement and bliss because you're so looking forward to this moment. You've been looking forward to this moment for all this time, and you are so excited to be there. And you are going to be in your body, and you're going to see her walking down the aisle, and you're going to imagine yourself being just overflowing with emotion because it's the culmination of all of your hopes and dreams. Then you're going to step out of your body and you're going to see yourself as though you're watching a movie. And you're going to see yourself there and notice the emotions that you're feeling. You're going to hear the sounds of the people around you, what they're saying to you. And then you're going to take that image and you're going to play it as if it were a movie, like 10 or 15 seconds. And you're going to play it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And you're going to really see, hear, and feel what's going on in that movie. You're going to see yourself in that
How long
image.
do you sit in that moment and then just let it go?
Well, so you don't just let it go. If you just let it go, then it's not going to work. What you have to do is you have to mechanically place it into your future. So you have to have you have to have specificity for this to work. And so you'll take and for purposes of thought process for everybody who's out there listening, if you imagine your life as a line and you're somewhere near the middle, right? All the past, every event in the past from this moment back to your birth, or even back to your parents' or grandparents' birth, that's all on one side of the line. On the other side of the line is your future. Okay, all the things, all the events that haven't happened yet but that are going to. You take that image, you watch it as a short 10 or 15-second movie clip for 5 times. You take that image and you take it up above your timeline, and you float out into the future to that date, July 1st, 2027, and you drop it down into your timeline and watch it float down into place and lock itself in there. Then you turn and you look back at yourself, and you travel back above your timeline to where you are right now, and notice all of the events between then and now rearranging themselves because you've just created a new reality.
So you visualize, take action towards, and then you manifest.
That's right. And specificity is king for this type of technique. You want to be as specific as possible. You want to go through everything. What emotions am I feeling? What am I hearing? Who's speaking to me? What am I seeing? What am I looking at? All of those things, because the more real you make it, the more likely your unconscious mind is to accept it and create behaviors that will get you that result.
Now, how can this work with affirmations?
Affirmations is a really, really good one because you can do it in a very specific way, or you can do it in a more general way. So, one of the classic affirmations is classic general affirmations is every day in every way I'm getting better and better. Now, that's a good thing to say, and that's a great affirmation to have. And you can be more specific. You can, like your friend said, talked about your friend saying earlier, money is always coming to me. I'm overflowing with financial abundance. Money comes to me easily. Everywhere I look, I see opportunities for more wealth. Those are more specific things that you can say that will automatically create new filters for your mind to look for those opportunities. Remember, this is just like we were talking about before, the difference between I can't and how can I. So if you start with the belief that there are opportunities everywhere, then you are much more likely to see those opportunities, and they will start popping up in places where you never would have looked before. So you say things to yourself about yourself that are positive and specific towards your goals. That's how those things start showing up for you in a very real way in the physical and in your future.
Now, how can everyday people use that?
So they can use it really effectively. One of the favorite tricks that I have that I teach all of my clients is the effectiveness of speaking to yourself in a conscientious way, right? Because most people, if not all people, are talking to themselves all day, every day. And like we talked about earlier, most of those self-talk points are negative. 70%. Some studies show even as high as 90%. So one of the things that you can do is to stand in front of a mirror every day, and the last image that you see before you go about your day is you. But it's a very specific you. Stand at least 6 feet back from the mirror, because that's the point at which your stereoscopic vision sort of blurs out all of the imperfections, right? Well, the problem that most people have is they get really, really close when they're looking in the mirror and they're staring at all of their imperfections, right? Where your attention goes, your energy flows. They're focusing on the problem, right? So you have to step back far enough that the problems disappear. And this is a metaphor for every area of your life. If you can step back far enough for the problems to disappear, then you can start to see the path forward, what you want to see. So in the physical, you do that, step back, and you say specific things to yourself while looking yourself in the eyes, which can be a very hard thing for some people to do because most of us are not used to or comfortable with being seen. And neurologically, we won't go into the quantum on this, which is really interesting by itself, but neurologically, you're looking at yourself, and it's amazing how uncomfortable a person can feel just seeing themselves from that perspective. But if you're willing to sit with that discomfort just for a little while, a couple of minutes, just look at yourself. And instead of allowing whatever stories are coming up to play in your head, speak aloud specific things such as, I love you. You're amazing. You are handsome. You are intelligent. You are wealthy. You were created for a purpose, and that purpose is to positively impact people's lives. Those sort of things that you say to yourself while looking at yourself have a very profound impact on the beliefs that you have about you, the self-talk that you will have the rest of the day. Because the last thing that you do before you look away, before you walk away from the mirror, is remember to tell yourself, I love you. You've got this. Those things, it's one thing to just say them to yourself, right? And those are great things. But when you couple that with visually connecting with yourself, you have an incredible toolbox right there that everybody can use because let's face it, pretty much everyone spends an inordinate amount of time in front of some sort of reflection of themselves, whether it's for a selfie or in front of the mirror every day.
I love that because, not that many people say I love you to themselves because you're born alone, you're gonna die alone.
You're absolutely right. And like we talked about earlier, the mind doesn't know that anyone else exists. It only knows that you exist. So start talking to yourself the way you want other people to talk to you, right? You know, if someone says something mean to you, you notice immediately. And chances are you're going to feel negative emotions as a result of that. Well,
But if you do what you did in the beginning of the podcast and you use those techniques, as in just take a deep breath,
mhm,
hey, maybe you'd be able to avoid those emotions.
absolutely, 100%. And just like I said, just creating that space can be enough for you to make a logical decision about whether you want to accept that belief or accept that statement about yourself. And the same is true when you are talking to yourself. So you give yourself that space and become aware of when you're saying negative things to you and go, do I want to believe that about myself? So talk to yourself the way that you want other people to talk to you. And if you do that with the aid of your visualization, you're going to see effects almost immediately because that awareness is going to create more awareness of yourself and of the things that other people are saying.
You know, I really want to ask you, what lessons do you hope your kids learn from you?
That is a great question. So, I'll give a little bit of backstory on myself here because I want people to know that I'm not just, some guru spouting all of this, great sense. You just follow my there was a there was a journey that it took me to get here. And so, the things that I'm saying are things that I think will help people on their own journeys. And I started this journey because I was in a very, very dark place. Um, I spent a lot of time and energy in what I thought was, positive directions. And I got married pretty early in life. I think I was 25 when I got married, and had 2 children, was living the, um, ideal marriage, and, doing all of the things that I was taught and raised to do, and it was not enough. Like I said earlier, I was not a good parent, not because I didn't want to be, but because I did not have the tools and resources that allowed me to recognize. I didn't know anything about states. I'd never heard of any of the things that I'm, talking and sharing with you today about, because they were just outside of my awareness. And you don't know what you don't know. Once you learn where to look, then you can start to gain new knowledge, which will lead to new results. And so for myself, I had all of these things that I was doing. I was working, and, we bought a house, and we were raising a family, and it wasn't it wasn't working for me. I felt disrespected and, unappreciated for all of my efforts, and I've learned how to recognize how to be at cause for that. But at the time, I felt I was a lot at effect. I looked at my life, and I said, well, if my wife was doing all of these things, then I would be happy. And the problem is, not with the choices that I've made that brought me here. It's with the state that I'm currently in. And, you know, essentially what happened was I eventually gave up on things going the way that I wanted them to. And I was unfaithful in my marriage, and that led to, divorce, and I lost custody of my kids for a while. And so I went down a dark hole, and I knew that while it was happening, that I needed new information. And I never had the idea or the feeling that, oh, why is this happening to me? By the time I got to that point, I recognized at some level that I had to start being at cause for my actions. I didn't know what that was yet, in that specific context, but I knew that I had to do something different, because what I was doing wasn't working, and it hadn't worked. Like I said, I'd loved my children dearly, but I wasn't the best father. I would get angry with them, and I would respond harshly to their unresourceful states, because I didn't know how to do it differently. And so I took that happening, that dissolution, the implosion really of my relationship, and I said, okay, I know that there are answers out there. I'm certain of it. I believe that there is a way for me to learn what I need to learn in order to create a different life. And I took that belief, and I said, what have I been denying? What have I been repressing? And what have I been closed off to that I need to become open to the possibility of? And so what I really focused on was opening myself up and allowing the possibilities to come to me. Because remember, like I said, just with the idea that I can't, if you give yourself the belief that it's not possible and that you won't find anything, then you won't look. There's no point in looking if you already know that you're not going to find anything, right? So I really focused on opening myself up to the possibility that there was something that I could learn that could change my life and allow me to live and do and be the things that I said I wanted. So what that led to was actually me being open to all kinds of things. I came across um, a set of recordings that were positive affirmations, basically. And at that point, didn't really have any conception of what that was, but I came across these set of recordings, and I remember seeing it was like a Facebook ad or something. And I'm like, I was open to anything. I was truly open and just looking and waiting to receive. And so I came across these recordings and I'm like, oh, it was like $7. Okay, I'll buy it. I'll see what it's about. This sounds like it could be useful. And so I started listening to them, and they were general affirmations, like every day in every way I'm always getting better and better. Things like that. So there's a whole bunch of these affirmations. And so I started listening to them every morning and every night. So before I woke up and before I went to bed. Now, what I didn't know at the time, which I've learned since then, is from a neurological perspective, those are the two times when the mind is most open to suggestion. So that's why it's so important to end the day with gratitude and with positive intentions, and to start the day with those, because that's when the mind is ready and willing and open to new information and new beliefs. So I did that. And then I came across this, and I did that for a few weeks, and it was amazing. Like, I immediately noticed a change in myself and the way that I viewed things around me, because been feeling very, negative. Obviously, I'm in this terrible spot emotionally that, is largely my own creation. I haven't all of these terrible things. I barely get to talk to my children. And then I noticed, wow, this is actually making a difference for me. I feel better about myself, and this has to mean something. Then I came across the energy cube concept. I came across a Facebook ad, and I saw it and I was like, mind blown, because nothing like that had ever been described to me before. The idea that we could, hold and store emotions in our bodies was completely new information. And and so, you're looking at this guy who's he was raised in the church, and taught to do, this is what you do all of these things and you're going to get all of this stuff. If you follow these rules and do everything that you're supposed to do, everything is going to work out for you. And so, coming from that, highly rigid, structured sort of environment, both social and emotional, to this idea of, what a lot of people would describe as woo woo, like this idea that you can transfer energy, and that you can hold emotions as an energy state in your body, was just crazy to me. So I I immediately responded to the ad and I signed up for courses. I didn't even know what they were. I didn't know what hypnosis was. I didn't even have, an idea. Some people have of it. We talked about this last time about, stage performers having people do funny things on stage, right? I didn't even have that concept. I was so It was so out of my area of experience. And so I didn't really know what I was signing up for. What I knew was that what I had heard had created an instant change in my thinking. My mind had just exploded with the ideas and possibilities for what that could mean for me. And that was the start of my journey from where I was to where I am now. Like I said, just got married, incredibly happy. I'm so grateful for the lady that I have now, and I'm able to, eventually regained shared custody of my children, and I'm able to to answer your question, to give them the states that I am learning, to teach them the tools that I have taught myself or that I have been taught by others. And it all comes back to state management, what identities you allow yourself to hold, and what beliefs you have about yourself, what is valuable to you. So, as a father, my goal is to teach my children to manage their states, to assess and become aware of identities that they have accepted, and to look at and decide whether those are serving their best interests, and then to be aware of their values and what is important to them. Because what happens when a person is in conflict with their values is you get things like, you're unhappy at work and you're unhappy at home. If you have a value, say, of family, but you're single, you're going to feel discontent, right? So if you become aware of the values that you have by doing the process that we talked about earlier, the beliefs you have about yourself, you can also do the same thing for values. What is valuable to me in the context of work? And just ask yourself what terms come up, things like teamwork, um, or working alone, having my own space, being accountable, having freedom. Those are all values that you hold about a specific subject. And so you can do the same thing with relationships, with your work, and you can look at those values and say, okay, if the first, then what you do is you organize them into a hierarchy. So the first 6 ones you pick out, okay, this is the most important to me. Second most important, third most important, fourth most important. Do that for the top 6, because you really can only hold like 95 to 98% of your energy goes towards those top 6. And the first one is like half of your energetic output. Okay. So if you can figure out what your number one value is, and then look at the area that you're doing that assessment in, you can get a really good idea really easily of whether you're in conflict with your values, right?
Sawyer, what would you say to a dad who feels lost right now?
So, what I would say to a dad who's feeling lost right now is, I've been where you are, and I know exactly what it's like. I didn't mention this, but there was a point at which I was suicidal. I just thought about, what would happen if I just ended it right now? And so I get where you're at, and I have felt those emotions of desperation, angst, hurt, all the emotions that you're feeling right now are valid, and they don't have to be permanent. They can be transient, because you can create a new reality for yourself. And progress doesn't necessarily look like taking giant leaps. Progress is movement. And even the smallest movement can affect a huge change. I was stuck where I was, right? I was in a deep, dark place. I was stuck there emotionally. You have the choice of letting those negative emotions keep you stuck, hold you down, or you can decide, it doesn't matter what I'm feeling right now. I can still show up for myself in this situation. Because, like you said, Matthew, you are born alone, you die alone. You are the one who needs to come and save you. If you're waiting for someone else to do it, you're going to wait forever. Now is the time when you have the choice to step up for yourself and to make yourself come to the rescue take yourself from where you are to where you want to be by changing the focus of your life, changing the focus of your thoughts. Instead of looking around at all of the terrible things that you're experiencing right now and going, this sucks, you can do that. And then what you can do is say, where can I find opportunity in this situation? And if you can step out of your body for just a moment, just visualize you, just float back out of your body and see yourself sitting or standing there wherever you're at. If you can step out of your physical space and into a space where you're in observation of yourself, you can take that space, just like we talked about earlier, to make a decision of how to respond to what you're feeling right now, rather than allowing the emotions that you're feeling to dictate your response.
Yeah, your emotions, you don't want them to control your reality.
That's right. That's right. And if you don't make the conscious decision to control your emotions, they will control you. And
Yep.
they if you have been doing this for a while, if you've practiced that, which pretty much everyone has since childhood, right? You experience something negative and that becomes your reality. And
It's
then you
powerful.
to expect that reality. But you can choose to change it. You can choose to say, that was the reality, acknowledge that it exists in the past for you, and say, I can still create a new reality. It's never, ever too late to create a new reality for yourself.
Because life is meaningless. It's on you to find meaning behind it in the positivity or finding the negativity in it. It's on you to find that.
That's right. Your life truly is what you make of it. And if you choose to make a lot out of it, that's because you've chosen to be at cause for the creation of your reality. And you can.
I want to ask you, what's the best piece of advice you can share at this point in your life?
So, the best piece of advice that I can share at this point, with all the things that I've learned, all the things that I've gained, like I shared at the beginning, the ability to look at your values and your identities and become aware of not just them, but whether they are serving you is incredibly helpful. What I would say is you can do not just what you set your mind to, but you can do things that you don't feel like doing. You can do things that feel hard. And I've done a lot of those things in my life, especially in the last couple of years. But in order to do those things, you have to start with the belief that you can. So
I love
stop,
that. I
start
love
seeing
that so much.
and watch how much more you are able to do.
You can and you will.
That's right. Remember, this is something I love. Toxic positivity. You are going to succeed. You have no choice. You have no say in the matter. If you put yourself at the effect of your success, then that's a good way to be at effect, right? So, Matthew, you're going to succeed. This podcast is going to blow up. Every area of your life is going to be amazing. There's nothing you can do about
I love
it.
it. I love it. Thank you.
Absolutely, my friend.
And Sawyer,
Looking
as
forward
you
to pod-
know, the podcast is called Every Day is Friday. It's
That's
Friday is a
right.
special energy, whether it's freedom, excitement, or just feeling accomplished after a long week. I want to know from you, what does Every Day is Friday mean to you?
So to me, every day is Friday means that we have that choice every day to wake up and say, what kind of day we're going to have, right? Just like I said before, bring it back to this. Nothing is worth more than this day. And if you take that nothing is worth more than this day energy, and combine it with that mindset, that state that you're in when it is Friday because you're excited and it's going to be the weekend and you're looking forward to all the things you're going to do. Utilize that state and watch your life change for the better.
I love that every day is Friday is about bringing that energy into everyday life.
That's right. Because it's your life, right? You only have you only have the days that you're given. You might as well live them all like it's Friday, energetically.
Amen to that one. You only get so many summers in a lifetime, and every day is Friday.
That's
Sawyer, this is your chance to leave the listeners with something powerful. Is there anything else you want to share?
well, you know, as a mindset trainer, I work with a lot of people who, are going through things in their life. And one of the most important things that I teach them is to ask yourself, am I the type of person that I want to be at a deep, deep level? Or are there beliefs about myself that are limiting me and keeping me from achieving the things that I want? If you find those limiting beliefs, and you can hear them in your speech, right? You know, the I can'ts, the I would never, or that's not me, that's a really, really powerful one. You say things like, oh, I'm not the sort of person like me. I had a limiting belief about technology for years. I didn't have a smartphone until 2020. Like, I had a flip phone before that,
But
and
it's
I had,
that being open.
yes,
That's
because
that's the power within.
I was so close to that concept. So I had a limiting belief about my ability to utilize technology. Now, because I changed that belief, I help other people when they're struggling with learning how to utilize technology. So finding out where those beliefs are showing up in your life, where the things that you decided you couldn't do are keeping you from doing it, is going to create a whole new world for you to explore. Because if you treat your life like a video game, you say every day you get up and say, "Oh, I'm gonna go explore this area. I've never been over here before, and that looks kind of interesting. Let's just go check it out. Let's see what's over there." If you live your life as though it's not really real, you can hack. You can hack your life. You can create all sorts of new experiences for yourself that, if you hold the identity of someone, this is who I am. My name is Mark. I'm an accountant. I go to work. I come home. I'm not really a people person, right? Identities like that keep you from experiencing the vast richness that is possible for you. So let those identities go and just find out who you could be if you could be anyone.
I love that because even with me, if I have a rainy day outside and I just say this is so bad, this has to be good, and then I just say the gratitude I have because I went into this building and I ate some good food now because of this.
Yeah,
It's the little things that make the biggest difference.
that's right. You find the elevator's broken, you have to take the stairs. Thank you that I get to exercise my body and build more muscle and create more energy in myself, right?
Yep.
Change the way that you talk about and view your reality, and the feelings, the emotions will change as a result.
I love it. All your information will be in the description down below. Where do you want people to follow and support your work? Is it still Instagram?
Yeah. So I've got a mindshiftnlp.com is my website. If anybody wants to schedule or book a call with me, they can go there. I'll drop that in a link. And also, I didn't tell you this yet, Matthew, but a really exciting thing. A friend of mine and I are starting a YouTube channel. It's going to be called The Deeper Journey. And we're going to be looking at and it's going to be broadly for men to look at the different aspects of living and challenges that we face every day and how we can use the tools that we've talked about to meet those challenges and become the best versions of ourselves.
I'm
So
looking forward to it.
yeah, it's going to be awesome. I'm sure that at some point we're going to have you on because you've got a lot of experience, especially in this sort of field, that's going to be really valuable. And I'm looking forward to drawing more of that out of you because obviously we've been interviewing, but you've mostly been interviewing me. I want to hear a lot about Matthew's inner world and how that shapes his reality.
I
So I'm
appreciate you saying that, and I would be honored to be part of your show. And like I said, I'm proud of you. Keep doing what you're doing. You're making an impact in this world. You made a big impact on this podcast already, like I said earlier. So I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate you, and I look forward to a lot more events like this because the work that we're doing is so important, right? Like I said, just the one little tip I gave you. Oh, instead of saying don't forget, say remember.
Yep.
Huge impact for you, right? It's just little things like this that people just need to hear, right? They don't know what they don't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. You didn't know what you didn't know. So keep your ears open, keep your eyes open as a person listening to this podcast. Start thinking about making yourself more aware of possibilities. Start looking for the possibilities, start thinking about the possibilities, and you're going to be amazed at how many possibilities start showing up for you.
And to everyone listening at home and tuning in, watching this, every day is Friday. Remember that. If you enjoyed this, make sure you follow, share, and keep this every day is Friday mindset going. Stay inspired and make every day feel like Friday. Till next time, everybody.